This is the Lean Builders Hoots on the Ground podcast with absolutely, positively no bullshito. Join us as we dig into exactly what lean construction is and how we can use these concepts and strategies in the field. This podcast will be different as we journey to job sites and mine the minds of lean builders, all in effort to pass forward building knowledge from those who have put their time in to learn a better way. Because that's just what lean builders do.
What's up, y'all? Adam Hoots here, the Lean Builder Hoots on the Ground podcast, coming to you with an incredible guest today. We've got Mr. Harry Schmidt here with O'Shea Builders. I'm super excited. I am a Harry fan. I love all things that you're doing out there, Harry. Would love for you to just take a minute and introduce yourself to the Lean Builder Nation. Tell us, who is Harry Schmidt?
Sure, Adam. Thanks for having me on your show today, and hopefully I can match your level of enthusiasm. That's exciting to hear, and it is exciting to be a lean builder. And at least from, personally, from my story, it's been a very serendipitous road, winding to get here. But I think the collection of experiences I have in my background have probably uniquely positioned me to lead in this space, just because you get this broad exposure to many different systems and many different facets of business, and being able to pull them together collectively here into the construction industry is really exciting. From a background standpoint, I was in the military for a fairly long time. I retired after 20 years in both the Navy and the Air Force. I used to fly airplanes for a living. Sometime over a beer, I'd love to sit down and talk about flying on and off aircraft carriers, flying F-18s. I was a graduate of Top Gun, Navy Fighter Weapons School. I got asked back as an instructor there as well. If you think about your planning, your briefing, execution, debrief cycle, I lived that for 20 years in flying airplanes. And so I'm a big believer in coming up with a plan, getting the plan out to your team, executing the plan, and then debriefing on it. And if you think about that, if you're familiar with Last Planner, hey, there's your planning cycle or your weekly work plan, as it comes together. So I'm super passionate about that. After I retired, I moved into healthcare. I was a healthcare IT professional for a couple of years. I worked in facilities management, design and construction for about 10 years. And then I ultimately served as a president and CEO of a hospital. So I've been around kind of the management structure of healthcare for quite a bit. And then I moved here with O'Shea Builders. I've been here for about 3 years. Director of Business Strategy, and one of my key responsibilities is the implementation of our lean initiatives that we have been going on for the last 3 years. It's been super exciting. I've got a really eclectic background, but I think it applies really nicely to this lean space that I'm super passionate about. So thanks for having me on your show today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited. I mean, you got me riding a million miles an hour right now. Fun fact, you were actually the CEO president at the hospital that I was born at, which is in Jacksonville, Illinois. Not a very big place at all, like a town of maybe 20,000 people. Pretty awesome connection that we have there. Thank you for your military service. When you're talking about, effectively the PDCA cycle and the plan, do, check, adjust, or briefing cycle, I think is how you refer to it. Have you seen an article that's been floating around LinkedIn on the World War II planes as they came back with the bullet holes and trying to go back and look? I may flash that up here because that was so powerful to me, just that story. I may, when you're analyzing kind of where the shots were being taken and what was taking the planes down versus, well, these are the planes that actually made it back. I think that negative thinking, that logic there is what's ringing around in my head. The other thing I'll toss out there is your term of R&D, right? Can you take us down that road? What does R&D mean? Because I've certainly R&D'd your R&D phrase, and I want to give you full credit for it. But what is R&D in your world?
I think I picked that up in healthcare, and I don't remember exactly the context of it. But people talk about investing a lot of R&D dollars, right? Research and development. But my version of R&D is learning from other people, right? Other people have great ideas, and I go out and I basically try to rip off and deploy, right? So I take somebody's great idea and I'm like, hey, can I see that in the spreadsheet, or can I figure out how you did that? And then I try to apply that to the space that I'm in right now. And that mindset, it's kind of funny, but it's really served me well throughout my career, though, because you take these situations in aviation, for example, and you go, hey, well, now I'm over here in the IT space. And you're like, I used to do something like that over here. And that, that framework applies in this situation, right? You kind of rip it off from aviation and deploy it into IT as you're doing that. And so you can take a lot of these experiences and you can apply that framework or what you've learned from a system standpoint into a lot of different areas and a lot of different facets. And it's really interesting because when you bring something new like that into a different industry or a different process, it's a fresh look at it. It's a new way to think about how you're solving problems together. And that's where, when I talk about or I hear about diversity, that's why I think it's super important when you bring different people with a different background into a team experientially, because they think about and solve problems differently. Engineers think different than architects do. And they think different than, how do people that have been brought up in the construction industry, how do you typically solve problems? That's my background on my R&D, right? I like to rip off and deploy and figure out, if it's a best practice, somebody a lot smarter than me has spent time thinking about it and figuring it out. I'm not too prideful to take it and use their success and apply it to my current situation.
Absolutely. Usually my only requirement is that you give it back a little bit better than you ripped it. And I'm sure you may have heard us talk about, I think it was even the first episode, Keyan Zandy. And so, in fact, we've actually kicked around the idea and would love to get your approval right here, not to put you on the spot or anything, but we've been kicking around a couple of these segments as going in with R&D with Hoots and Key, trying to go and read a book together and then figure out how we rip that book and deploy it into the construction industry. So can we get your approval to maybe do a couple of those shows?
Yeah, that'd be super cool. And I'd love to participate sometime as well. If you want to brainstorm ideas, I'd be happy to play in that sandbox as well.
Deal. Absolutely. We're gonna get you in and we'll kick it off. I know Keyan was excited about the 5 levels of delegation, which I can share some of that writing with you. We'd love to have it plug you in and just get more conversation. That's what lean builders do, right? Like you said, experiential. We all have a different perspective. So let's tap into that and understand with your unique road here. I'm excited to get you involved with that. Absolutely.
Yeah. So my only criteria, Adam, is, as a fighter pilot, the books that I read need to have a lot of pictures. I can't.
Spoken like a true builder. I love it. They don't give us well, I guess they do give us a book full of specs. They also give us those pictures with it, just the same. What from Harry's perspective constitutes a lean builder?
I'm going to borrow the phrase from Jason Schrader, I think, about if you can create flow. I think a lean builder is one that can create flow where I don't have starts and stops, where I don't have negative iterations, so thinking, keeping the end in mind and knowing that if I can start and I can pace my way to get there, I'm going to be a lot better off in the end game than somebody that's going to sprint out of the chute and then have to stop, and then course correct somewhere else and then make an adjustment. And so I think when we look at our processes, if you can, as a lean builder, if you can create flow in everything that you do, you're going to create the most efficient process that you have, and it's going to be the most effective, both from a culture standpoint, and an employee satisfaction standpoint, but also from a financial standpoint. It's gonna be a kind of a win-win if you can think about it that way, as you're creating flow. And I take that from an athletic standpoint. I played soccer way back in the day, back through college as well. And if you talk to any athlete, right, when they're in flow and they're in that moment, the game is going 1,000 miles an hour, but when you ask them about it and they're in the moment and they're in their flow, it's like things are going in slow motion for them. Think about that in your job site and all the chaos that we have going on right now. If you can create flow, it's almost like it slows down and you borrow the SEAL motto, right? Slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
I was just thinking that.
I like that idea from a lean standpoint. If you can apply that in everything that you do, or use that with the lens for making improvements in what you're doing, I think you're going to end up being a lean builder in the end game.
Everything focused on flow. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I've got an area on my coach's website that is spot the floto, and it's literal pictures of project sites. And there are flow in the projects, but it's sometimes you got to look really deep in order to spot flow. It doesn't always jump out and punch you in the face.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the most challenging things. That's one of the best descriptions I think I've ever heard of a lean builder. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, no worries. I'm going to put myself on report here, right? Back in my experience, when I first started to learn about Lean and Lean Six Sigma, that's where I got some formal training. I was of the mindset of, hey, give me the tool, I'll figure it out, right? You know what I mean? Let me figure out the spreadsheet, and yeah, okay, I got it with Lean. To me, Lean was about the tools, and I'm going to apply it to the data, and I'm going to tell you, well, that's what you need to go fix, and then go take care of it. And so, man, I've learned so much from the Lean perspective of coming into the construction industry. And I think part of it is because I'm much more involved with a lot of the frontline processes out in the field. I go out and I coach teams out in the field, and I'm probably out in the field. My average is probably 2 days a week. And so I'm a lot closer to the work right now than I've been in some of my previous roles. And I think that's where I've really started to gain understanding about Lean is, when you see the morale on a job site, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is it's killing the team. And you can tell that they don't want to be there, right? So you're like, well, how do I fix that? What are the problems? Or how do we help increase the morale? How do we make it so they want to be here? And, that's where we have really focused at O'Shea Builders on shifting our superintendents from what they have learned in the industry as a directive leadership style. You know what I mean? They show up and they tell people what to do, right? That's what they were brought up to do. And when you're put in charge, what do? You show up and you tell people what to do. Well, two things, A, people don't know what the full plan is. All they know is what you just told them. There's a plan in your head that if you get it out of your head and let other people look at it, they're going to be able to say, ask some questions. And it's not because you're wrong. They just want to make it better. That's that idea of visual management. And then the third part is we all make mistakes, right? And so if you're being directive all the time, things aren't going to go as well as they could for everybody. And it's very demoralizing. So we're shifting, we really work hard with our superintendents as they're leading our last planner initiative to shift from that directive leadership style to a facilitative leadership style, where they facilitate the meeting and they're trying to enable the team and the people in using the respect for people, right? And I use the phrase collectively in the room, we are all smarter than any one of us. So ask good questions, ask questions about what did I miss? What could we do better? How is this going to affect what your plan is going to be, and really manage people up. It's really been rewarding. It takes the pressure off the superintendent because they don't need to be the subject matter expert and the person on the spot every day. And then it really releases a lot of great ideas or enables a lot of great ideas because people feel valued. You ask them a question about how would you do it better? How can we do this different? Is this the best way that we're going to solve this problem? Next thing you know, somebody's going to go, and fill in the blanks. That has been, I think, the biggest shift for us here at O'Shea is that pivot from directive leadership to facilitative leadership.
What's been the biggest challenge with that shift?
Believe it or not, I think the biggest challenge is giving them the permission to not know everything. Let's say you and I had a conversation about your work that you were about to go put in place, right? Like the old style where we'd go, hey, what are you doing? And Bob, and you ask me some question. I'm like, yeah, get going. And then we go to do something else or we come to a meeting together. Often they've got this sense that when somebody goes, hey, I can't remember your background. Did you come up in the plumbing?
Yep.
Trade? Yeah, that's right. Yep. I thought it was. So they're like, hey, what's the plumber doing? Well, in the old school, the superintendent would be like, yeah, he's doing this and that and whatever else. And it's like, well, wait a minute, you're sitting right here. Why don't we let Adam talk about his work, instead of me being the one that knows it all, right? It's like, hey, what you just talked about, but I'm going to manage you up and say, hey, Adam, let's talk about what you this or that or the other thing. And I share with them too in this facilitative leadership style. You've had a lot of these conversations already preparing for the meeting or where you're going to go, right? And they're like, oh, yeah, I've asked the questions. I said, well, then a lot of times in meetings, I already know the answer to probably 80% of the questions I'm going to ask. But, and I'm not saying I'm a know-it-all, but the reason I ask the questions, though, is I know the answer because I met with you, but the rest of the group doesn't know the answer. I want to bring the group along, but I want to do it by managing you up. You're the expert in the space. I am not. And so I think in the past, we've done that, right? We ask the questions and then we tell everybody, hey, look what I know. And just, that paradigm shift. And I think that's one of the hardest things is to get people to say, I know you know it, but defer to the real expert in the room and you'll get a whole bunch of things that'll happen, right? You're going to trust me a lot more because I've just managed you up and I reference your expertise, right? Somebody's going to ask a question that I probably couldn't answer because I'm not the expert. And now they're already talking to the expert. And so you're going to create that bond and you're going to deliver credibility in the room for what you know as well. And then people are going to look at me as a more humble leader because I've just deferred to somebody. I think that's one of the challenges is when they work really, really hard to know and understand what the work is, but then kind of dial it down a little bit and say, okay, you don't need to prove to everybody that you know it all. You can also show everybody you know it all by deferring to the people in the room. Hey, I'm going to let Adam talk about that. Hey, I'm going to let Joe talk about that.
Yeah, and let's face it, you can't know it all. Inevitably going to only be able to scratch the surface. That's a general contractor. And so we only have a general knowledge of all things. That's why we hire trade partners,
right.
Niche contractors to be able to come in and do the things that we can't do. And so, but that takes getting outside of your comfort zone, right? I mean, like you said, these superintendents, their brains have been trained for years on years. You better have the answer when I come to you asking the questions. I like how I think you said, giving those superintendents permission to not have all the answers. I think that's an incredible way to put it. And that is quite the challenge right there in itself. But like you said, I think a lot of these conversations we're having are that of facilitation. You mentioned the last planner system. I guess you guys are using the last planner system at O'Shea Builders. Is that the case on most of your projects?
Yes, we started our journey in February of 2020. COVID hit in March of 2020, right? We've only been at this for 2 years, and we have seen a couple of really interesting things. I've been tracking it from a data standpoint, and on average, our projects are completing 12% faster than what our original schedules are.
Wow.
Think about that. On a 1-year project, we're getting the job done 1.2 to 1.4 months faster than what the original, CPM schedules that we were putting together.
Wow. That just on incorporating the last planner system.
Just for last planner. That doesn't really talk about how TACT has helped us do that too with some TACT planning. That's a kind of a refinement of it. And from a financial standpoint, that has delivered about a 20% increase in our net income.
Wow, that's incredible.
From a margin standpoint. So let's say, for example, if we were at 4% margin, we're running 5% margin. There's a 20% increase. Basically on the same revenue, our leader, Mike O'Shea, the president of the company, he has this philosophy that the top line represents risk that you're taking. And then the bottom line is the reward of how you're delivering on that. So what he wants to do is he wants to get the bottom line closer to the top line. If you keep running after revenue, if you're trying to increase the top line, you're going and you're chasing more and more risk.
Yeah.
Risks that you may not know, risks that you may not understand. So he's happy. He's happy with the top line being flat if the bottom line is coming up. And that's what we have done with Last Planner. We had a couple other margin enhancement initiatives that contributed to that 20%. So I'm not going to give it all to the Last Planner, but I would say at least 50% of that gain has been with Last Planner.
I mean, heck, with GCs alone, if you're finishing jobs, 12-month jobs a month ahead of time, that in itself is going to turn out more reward as well. And I feel like if you're not raising that line, but you're raising the reward, I feel like there's a lot more focus on delivering a more quality product. You're following Little's law. You are limiting your work in progress.
Right.
You're finishing projects as you go, and you're worried about them in small batches. I mean, I think that's critical. I love how you go ahead.
And I was just going to say, there's one more component of this that I think is even more valuable than those first two pieces that I shared. Obviously the schedule piece is huge. The profit piece is huge. One anecdote I'll share with you, a team I was coaching for about 3 months, and it was an older superintendent that we had. And he was really hard to read. He was kind of introverted and, but you're just trying to figure out how is he receiving all this? So I had him aside just by ourselves at the end of one of our meetings. And I just said, hey, gloves off. Tell me what you're thinking. Tell me how this has been, what this experience is like. And he paused for a second. And he took a big sigh and put his hand on his chin. And he went, well, Harry. And I went, oh, boy, here it comes. And then he said, I sleep at night now. And I was like, wow. So not only are we doing better on the schedule, but we've helped him get organized, and he's managing his work in a way that he's not taking that stress home to his family. He's like, he used to have a pocket full of stickies, right, at the end of the day and trying to go, okay, what do I need to do and figure out whatever, right? We've created a system to put it together. And then I have had on more than one occasion, as we're doing a plus delta, I've had trade partners that maybe weren't used to using this system. And they've said their comments are things like, these job sites are different. We don't fight anymore. And you're like, man, that's huge. We've got this theme that we talk about is that we want to move from what we used to call controlled chaos, and we're trying to move to calm predictability.
Ooh, I like that a lot.
Chaos is everybody's get working, go do something. Everything is all over the place, right? You got materials all over the place. You got workers all over the place. You got debris and so we're trying to move from that to get organized and bring down the chaos and make it calm predictability. Those are the three things that I've just really seen over the last 2 years as we've implemented this. The biggest change has been for the people, right? The benefits, it's for the morale of the job. It's for the experience that people are having when they go to work every day has just been fantastic. And then from the owner standpoint, we're delivering the schedules earlier. From the profitability standpoint, what's better for the company? It's like, wow, this has just been a great ride. It's been a lot of fun. As we're scaling this, we're looking for a lean champion to help lead the initiative. For my role, I'm doing a lot of things, but as we're coaching teams and we're doing different things, just to plug we've got a job sitting out there that we're trying to hire a lean champion here at O'Shea Builders, basically to continue the work that I'm doing. Not that I'm going to step away, but I'm starting to move into the target value delivery space. We're trying to move upstream into project development. We see that as the next the next frontier of being able to set a project up for success, and now we can just run it. That flow idea. I think we can all admit, if you're anywhere near the design process right now, in the design part of design and construction, that is anything but flow.
Easy now, don't make our designer audience mad here. I'm just kidding. We don't have any designers watching. This is boots on the ground. I agree. I mean, there's certainly tons of room for improvement the more upstream you get. I think just thinking about transactional waste, it's incredible, making sure expectations are understood and met and delivered upon, and the way we're able to design projects such that we can install them with more flow in the field. These are things that, I see you guys doing more than the Last Planner system. I guess take me through what qualities in a lean champion are you looking for that are going to enable you all to go and focus on those next things?
From the lean champion standpoint, part of it is being able to go out and coach these teams. You almost have to be a facilitator of facilitators to have the ability to obviously know and understand the goals and objectives of the system, and then being able to provide the feedback to the teams, to be able to coach them through, why the various components are important and how to use them and how to then apply them to their thinking and problem solving. And also just that having that understanding of, I think the two pillars of lean as we traditionally speak to them, the two tenets, the respect for people piece, and then also the continuous improvement piece, right? Let's do something better today than we did yesterday. And here at O'Shea, we've kind of developed a ladder, the lean ladder, if you will, because I think a lot of people, if there's some, newcomers to lean listening to the podcast today, they're like, they can get distracted by, the shiny. Oh, let's do tact, and oh, let's go prefab. Well, we have kind of thought about it in a way that we have to start with the foundation of respect for people. And that means developing our team, creating leadership development opportunities to, we've actually got a whole conference room back here with 2 employee development professionals that we've got. It's called O'Shea University. We totally believe in developing our people first to say, we want to give you the best opportunity for success and be the best version of yourself that you can be. If we can't do that, I can throw every lean system, framework, whatever at you, but if you don't have the leadership skills to implement it and to lead, then we're going to struggle. Once we get past the respect for people, and that's also respect for our trade partners and everybody on the job site, the next level is to create a stable environment. And that's what the last planner system has done for us. It gave us that framework of how do we triage the different issues, right? How do we use visual management? What's the process? I capture this, I document it, and then I manage it, right? And that's the kind of the system we say, okay, now that I've created a stable environment, guess what? I've got some capacity now that I can start to see the waste and variation that was created before. So now that's the next level. Once I have a stable environment, now I can start to focus on reducing variation, right? And eliminating waste in what I see on the job site, whether it's, hey, let's go do a walk now. Hey, why are these extra materials here? Why is this here? Now, once I've gotten some of the obstacles out of the way, now I can apply tact and flow. I can hit the accelerator because I got all the things out of the way. There's a reason they don't have a Formula One race in the middle of a demolition derby. If you're like, hey, we're going to do tact and let's go, right? And you try to have your team do it, but you haven't gotten all the crap out of the way, they're going to be frustrated and they're going to go, this is stupid, it doesn't work. But you have to earn your way up the lean ladder. And then finally, if you start to flow, now how do I go faster? Well, now you're into your kitting for rooms and spaces, right? Or now you're into prefab, or now you're into some of those other advanced concepts, but you can't start there. You have to earn your way up that lean ladder. And that's just our philosophy. That's what we've put together. Maybe I need to put a little trademark next to it, but feel free to rip off and deploy in your organization. I'll give you permission.
Is it possible we could see the lean ladder? If you want to maybe flash it up, or if you want to just talk through it and just pretend like it's right there on the screen, I would love to learn more about the lean ladder and how y'all are making standards, right? Because I hear you talking about standards. Without standards, we can't improve anything, and how that leads to kind of this calm predictability, which, again, I am going to rip and deploy that for sure. I love the difference between controlled chaos to calm predictability. That's everything.
The bottom rung, right? Respect for people. And this is where we want to, have our culture of building people, and then create the stable environment with the last planner production control system. Then you reduce variation and waste. And we've got a tagline that we use to keep it safe, keep it clean, keep it lean.
Nice.
Then you can get to your flow and predictability with tact planning. And then finally, you get into your another continuous improvement piece up here with kitting and prefab in 5S.
I love that.
So,
that's genius. It's small J improvements. It's not taking on the most complex things first. It's understanding, developing some predictability, and then it's those baby steps of, okay, now that we have this, how do we make it a little bit better? And then how do we make it a little bit better? I very much value that approach to lean, because too often, and I was a victim of this myself. I wanted to implement the last planner system, and I went to the nth degree, and I was busting people up like, you didn't put your resources on this posted, and you didn't put your duration, and that's 12 days, not 10-day max. We stick to the rules, and and you're not able to take and modify the tool for the job. I think you really fall into some of these valleys of chaos and people who really start pulling against what the overall goal is.
As we work our way up this ladder, let's say, for example, you got to the point where you started and you got through the last planner system, or maybe you've done this before, and maybe you got it to TAC planning, right? And you're okay. I just flowed through and I got my job done. I killed it, right? And you're super happy. When you start your next job, you have to reassess your team, meaning who are the trade partners and who is everybody involved. And if they have not been a part of one of these before, this is something that we have really learned, and we gotta really be disciplined to do this. You can't start where you left off. You have to go meet the team where the team is. Right now, you may be able to accelerate, but if I've got one new player in this thing, I got to go all the way back, and I got to start at the beginning and go meet them where they are and bring them along to say, okay, here's what last planner system is, and I got to do onboarding with them. And it's going to slow people down at the beginning, but you're going to bring them along faster than if you're like, hey, we do TAC planning and watch out, and here's what I need for and they're like going, whoa, what the hell's happening here? And now you've created that frustration, and then they're going to be sub-optimized because they have no idea what's going on. I think that's another thing for everybody to realize is, I'm sure you've seen from LCI where they've got that graph that starts in the bottom left corner and it says, oh, your lean journey, you're unaware. And then you move to awareness. And then you move to understanding, then you move to competence, and then mastery, right? Well, if I'm in the competence square and somebody on my team is unaware, I can't expect them to come find me. I have to go pick them up and lead them and show them and bring them along. And I think that's been a really important revelation we've had in the last 6 to 9 months, is to go, we'd kill it on a project, and then the guy would go again right into the next project and he'd try to pick up where he left off. I totally respect your personal lean journey and your past competence and getting to mastery. But you just left your team in the dust back there, and they're the ones that are going to, carry you along, right? We're going to do this together, and I can't get across the finish line until everybody else finishes.
It's a system that we're all interacting and relying on one another. Not one person gets done without other people having gone before them and after them. And what we're talking about right now is flow. And it all starts with that level of trust. And so many times that I have failed with these lean tools because I've dove like right into the tool. And whether that tool is tax planning, which I'm going to bite on it here soon. I want to hear how O'Shea's making projects flow using tag planning, or if it's target value delivery or target value design or A3s or choosing by event, like all of these lean tools, none of them work unless you have established trust in that room. And the only way to do that is to understand where people are with the tools, whether or not, do you even really need the tool for the situation, or is the situation good enough without the tool? And so that's always a possibility. I think it leads back to how you defined what a lean builder is. Is it establishing flow? Is it driving flow on the job? Because flow is everything, whether we're flowing information, or we're flowing work, or we're flowing logistics, or we're flowing work or trades, or like whatever that looks like. Flow is everything. Take us through how is O'Shea Builders using this ladder and its most effective way with tack planning and room kitting and these other things that you're talking about.
Well, I think the foundational piece of it for our superintendents is using the last planner framework to stay organized. And I think, as I described it before, is it gives them a way to have connected conversations about issues and how and when and where to solve problems. It gives them a visual management situation where they can capture those conversations with action items. And then it gives them the reminder, right, of what the work is in front of them to get done by the team for the project. I think it's more about the connected conversations and a way to stay organized than it is necessarily about, like you were talking about, if I get really specific about, you got to fill this out and you got to do that, and you're very rule oriented, you could have the tool filled out correctly and never have the right conversation. And I think the biggest key to lean is having the right conversation with the right frame of mind. If we can be organized around the whole versus our silo or my piece of this or what's going to happen from here, if I can have the conversation and break down the walls of those silos and say, let's keep our mind on the whole here, what's going to be best for the project, and how are we going to eliminate this constraint, or how are we going to identify a roadblock and then solve it? That's where I think Last Planner has been super helpful for us from a lean concept, is we have really focused on the connected conversations and the quality of the conversations. And we use the tool to document and to capture those. And then it creates our to-do list or priorities, or, how do we solve and remove those things? And that starts to create flow, right? If I can identify something on a 6-week look ahead about, that's a problem that we're going to have, a roadblock we need to remove. I got a roadblock removal system. I document it. I have a meeting to understand exactly what the issues are. I get the right people involved, and we get the problem solved. We have actually gone back on our last onboarding. We brought our owners and our design partners into the Last Planner onboarding for the project team, because we said, when we escalate something to you, that needs to be a priority for you to solve for this team to keep moving. And they all kind of sat there and looked at us, because in the design partner, the RFIs are numbered. So how do they know which ones, right? Well, if all else fails, I'm going to go by the numbers.
Yep.
Well, especially if you're starting to flow and as you're starting to finish as you go through the project, I might need the answer to a flooring RFI well before I actually need the answer to the boiler RFI, because I'm putting flooring in the first third of the project. And initially, when we started doing that, the architects were like, well, why do you need that? That's stupid. You don't need the flooring RFI right now. And we're like, no, you don't understand our work. We're putting in flooring right now. And they're like, that's impossible. And we're like, no, we're putting in flooring right now. Come see. And they'd walk into the space, and this one, for example, it was a renovation that we were doing. So we had demoed in a tact, in a flow, but when you walked into the space, it was bare concrete. The next zone, you could see the metal studs were up. The next stone had some of the wiring that was put in, and the next one had drywall up. The next zone was painted, and then the next zone had flooring in it. And the architect was looking at us going, what are you guys doing? We're like, yes, we're flowing through the space, and we're using the resources, like a parade, like the parade of trades going through the space. And they were blown away. And we're like, so could you please answer the flooring RFI for us? Because we really are putting flooring down right now.
So you've hit a couple of my just pet peeves, I guess, in lieu of respect for people. And I said this a couple of weeks actually in a row here, I'm a big advocate for respecting of resources. I've found that when I can realize the resources that are around the person that I'm trying to respect, mm-hmm. and what are those resources that person values, when I have respect for those resources, inevitably that lends me to respecting that person. There's something about that phrase, that cliche, respect for people, that really, really just bothers me. I guess I'll just leave that there and then ask you a similar question. What is a word or phrase or just something that irks Harry? Like what's something that you hear and you're just like, oh my goodness, if I want to choke somebody after I hear that.
I'm generally pretty calm. I think one of my frustrations is when somebody identifies a problem, but then they don't think through a solution or recommendation. It's like telling me, hey, the water valve's broken back there and it's leaking all over the place. Well, did you do anything about it? No. Well, okay, thanks. I guess I'll go back, stop the water first, but it just seems like a lot of times, I shouldn't say a lot of times, there's times when people, they want to point out, isn't there a quote from, trying to think who it was, where they point out where the strong man stumbled.
What do you have, like an encyclopedia there?
I remembered where I'd read it, so I just pulled the book off the shelf.
That's awesome. What book is this?
It's from John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership.
Okay.
And being a super geeky guy, it's from chapter 3, The Law of the Process. It's a Teddy Roosevelt quote. It says, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man that points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error or shortcoming, but who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who, at the best, knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who, at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who knew neither victory nor defeat."
Man in the arena. Absolutely. I've heard that before.
Yeah.
I think Mike Tyson has a similar saying, or at least it's fewer words than that.
Yeah.
You can't beat a man that doesn't quit.
Yep.
And so, you just can keep getting up and learning and getting better and improving each time. And it's kind of been a bit of a theme for the conversation we've been having here as well.
Yeah. But the thing that reminded me about that is the critic part of it. That's the part that drives me crazy. I think it was your original question was what makes me, spin inside myself is the person that'll critique and not participate in the improvement. Super easy to do, right? Very easy to sit back and go, wow, you guys you're not meeting the grade. It's like, oh, thanks. It's like the guy you play golf with, right? And then you're up at the tee and you rip one into the woods. And then he goes, wow, that sucked. And you're like,
that was a terrible shot.
Yeah, I knew that.
Captain Obvious. Thanks, John Madden. Right?
Yeah.
That's hilarious. But I also hear you reverberating a lot around standards. And I love the latter. But this isn't just a standard on how you're, doing planning, right? How you run the last planner system. I mean, I've heard you kind of make reference to we have other standards and processes, and we've made strides at really standardizing the business. And I think that's kind of your role. Am I on this? Like, can you take us through some of those other non-scheduling, non-last planner type standards that you're establishing?
Sure. One of them, when I first started in the organization, and I was given some latitude to, look under the hood and kind of check things out and just kind of wander around and see, just watch what was happening. And one of the biggest frustrations we had was that our operations team, our field team was working, an extended period of time without the job cost file, of how the estimate was put together or what's the plan, right? And that's really what the job cost is. It informs the plan. Back to your point, the respect for resources. What resources did we allocate? How many? And what were they supposed to be doing? And what's going on? As I kind of dug more and more into it, we started to try to put data to it and say, hey, how long is it without, because sometimes you're like, we never get a job cost file, right? And then you're like, well, what is never, right? What's your version of never versus, so we tried to put some truth to it. We started tracking some numbers and we found that our average was that we were working for 30 days out in the field without a job cost file. Wow. And you're like, well, on a 1-year project, 30 days isn't that big of a deal. Well, the frustration is when the superintendent's trying to code time to get people paid. So he's like, I have nothing to code it to. He'd have to call the office and he would say, hey, give me a 99 code. That's what we call it, or a flex code or something, to say, just make something up so I can put time in so this guy can get paid for the work he did today, or we can, pay the subcontractor, whatever we're doing. So think about that. Interrupting flow, have to get on the phone, have to call them, create this. And then it was rework that had to be undone later on by accounting once the job cost was put into the system, then to go, okay, now how do we match these? And then making phone calls back and, hey, what did you do? And it was a big frustration. The other piece of that, and I'm kind of analysis geek, but 30-day average is one thing. But if you had to try to know and understand the variation in that, if I had to guarantee when that job cost was going to be in there based on the variability, it was closer to 120 days. If I had to give you like a 95% confidence interval, it's like, that's 4 months. We took an initiative to build the process then to say, okay, how are we going to go about doing this and understanding what is the expectation of the customer, meaning whose operations, what is your expectations? And they're like, I want to work 0 days without a job cost. I'm like, okay, fair enough. How do we do it? We mapped out the process. We got the team together and we got it down right now. I just ran the numbers because I wrote a kudos for our monthly meeting to celebrate with the team. For the last 4 months, we have 91% of the time we have gotten the job cost into the field they're working 0 days without a job cost file, 91% of the time. A good analysis, success story, PDCAs, and our average now is down to 3 days without the job cost files. We had a couple, we've got some variation in there. There's a couple here and there that get us. And typically those were kind of some custom jobs there where we had some unique things that we had to do. But now we've got understanding, right, of the process. And we know, oh, this one's going to be a problem. And we can tell the customer, hey, we're a little behind here. But they're like, okay, I can do it 3 days, right? I can work 3 days, not 30. It's a cool process story. And now I've got people, as we've brought them along, they're saying things like, hey, I want to reduce the variation in this. And hey, let's, they want to create a standard so they don't have to customize everything every time. It's just an example of another process that we've really identified there's a problem. And then we got a team together to, solve that and create a good process that's reliable. And then we monitor it. And we've done the statistics on it. So we know what each step of the process takes and then where the problems are starting to show up. And, it's really interesting when you're thinking about process. As soon as you remove chief constraint, it's going to show up somewhere else. You're like, oh, I solved this one. And you're like, oh, well, now it's going to reveal, okay, here's your next problem that you have to solve. So that's that continuous improvement piece. Focus on improving this part. And then as soon as you get that down, the next constraint's going to show itself. And I think that's like a Eli Goldratt, right? The Theory of Constraints book. If another something on your reading list, it's really fantastic to see how they went about that. It reads like a Lencioni, kind of a business novel, but it's a really cool book as well.
The goal, right? Yep. Talking about?
Yep.
Eliuhad Goldratt, and there's a sequel called It's Not Luck, which very few have actually read the sequel, and that's Alex Rogo's continuation of his journey up the corporate ladder, which is really cool. Anyway, I'm a Goldratt fiend. I also love some Clark Ching. The Bottleneck Rules is another one. But what you're describing is the wall of bottlenecks. Every system, every process has a bottleneck. And once you solve that bottleneck and optimize that bottleneck, another one's going to pop up. And so, again, that is one of the reasons tact planning works so well. You're able to see your bottlenecks way in advance. You're able to see what variation does, right? We're starting to get, again, don't get me fired up on the production laws. I will spend the rest of our time talking about the 4 production laws and how they drive all things flow. And so
it's not a one and done. It's literally a journey, and you got to bring everybody along with you, and I think that's been the fun part. Sometimes if you're caught in the throes of it, you might not see the improvement, or that's what I keep trying to do from my chair is, hey, how is this impacting safety? Hey, how is this impacting profitability? How is it impacting client loyalty? And I think you gotta, if you're starting or leading a program, you always gotta make sure that you're tying it back to, what are the things that are valuable for the company? Our mission is to create exceptional construction experiences. And so that includes, if you notice that, I didn't say for the customer, right? It's for everybody. So it's for the customer, it's for our trade partners, it's for our design partners, it's for our team, to create an exceptional construction experience for everybody, and tie it back to what does that mean? Well, for our clients, it means, right, schedule certainty and cost certainty. And for our trade partners, there's profitability in there. For us, there's profitability in there. Morale, keep tying this all back to say, here's the work we're doing, the reasons we're doing it, and then what are the outcomes for everybody. I'm fortunate, I get to see 15, 20 projects a year, so I get to see a ton of what's going on, and everybody else is in their struggle, kind of like our quote, right? They're the man in the arena with the sweat and grime on their face. I always have to try to come back and say, man, you're doing great. Keep it up. You got to be a cheerleader for the work that they're doing, because it's hard. It's hard work, but it's super rewarding.
Yeah, finding out what motivates them, right? And understanding that entire system and how this one change is going to have unintended consequences all the way through. And what does that overall impact mean to the journey? I love it. It's definitely, it's a cycle, right? I used to have a superintendent on one of my jobs. He used to talk about how you got to get the fish swimming in the same direction, right?
Yeah.
Inevitably, there's that one fish that's trying to swim back in the wrong direction. But it's all about thinking from a circular mindset in lieu of a linear mindset, and knowing that each action that I take is going to have consequences moving forward. And so the system will operate the way you have designed it every single time. And so if you want a different result, change your system, make something different with what you're doing. And I love all things that O'Shea's doing. I mean, you are the definition of a lean builder. What y'all are doing is certainly leading the industry. I'll go as far as saying that anybody who is tax planning on jobs and focusing on flow and understanding that, hey, it's longer than this one-time project. We're developing team capabilities. That's something that I've been a huge advocate for, pausing and reflecting as a team, getting outside your comfort zones as a team, asking the right questions, showing radical candor, getting feedback, and just saying thank you. Like, those are all ways that we develop capabilities as teams. I love what you're doing for the industry. It's huge. And you're seeing results, which I love to highlight and just get out there for everybody. Thank you for that. Would love to just give you the last word, because again, I'm comfortable with that, because that's what lean builders do. Take it from here, burn down the house. What do you got from a last word perspective to just help the Lean Builder Nation discover more of how to apply these concepts in the field?
I think the biggest thing I can say, first of all, is thank you, Adam. You're doing a great job of bringing the community together and creating those opportunities to R&D. Thank you for doing that. And I think the biggest thing that I want to encourage people is, this kind of work makes a difference in people's lives. It's not necessarily just about the business. The business does gain some reward from it, but I just want to encourage people that true lean practitioners make a difference in people's lives. I think that's when you think about that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. That's what makes me want to come into work, and I want to work with the people, and I want to make a difference in their life, so that when they come into work, they're like, yeah, this is good. This is, we're making a difference, and we're making things better together. So I just want to encourage people to think about lean from that perspective. It really makes it worthwhile.
You heard it. True lean practitioners are making difference in people's lives. We got Harry with the mic drop there. I love it. That was beautiful. Thank you for your time, Harry. I appreciate it. Keep changing the industry. You are an inspiration to me and many others.
Yeah, thanks, my friend.